started to jump right in with a question that came in via Facebook, and this happens to be a mom that I know with a little guy that I have had the pleasure of meeting who's really wonderful. She says, Dr. Doreen, please help. And this is a slightly longer one, so bear with me. My son turned 5 in December. He is nonverbal.
I'm going to need to borrow a pen.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you a pen. I gave you paper.
Sure I take notes
but
about this.
I thought that you were so transcendent that you could write with your finger. There we go. Okay.
So 5-year-old.
5 in last December. He's nonverbal. He had a therapist leave at the beginning of January, and he was without for almost a month. A new therapist jumped in the beginning of February and has been doing amazing with him. He has resorted back to some of his old habits that he hasn't done in a while. So some of the things that she details, he pours liquids out of his cup during the middle of a meal. He'll walk over to someone else's drink and just pour it onto the ground. There's been some hitting, not angry hitting or even frustrated hitting, more like attention-seeking hitting. I will be talking to someone or on the computer and totally not paying attention to him, and he will come over and just smack down both of his hands on my arm or lap. Once I look at him, he walks away. If I ignore his behavior, which I was instructed to do, he keeps doing it until I do look at him, and then he walks away. And lately, even though he is potty trained and has been for almost a year and a half, with the exception of wiping his own butt, which we are still working on, he has several times just dropped his drawers and peed on the floor in the living room, laundry room, backyard, and just yesterday the playground at school. Ironically, he does this when no one is around. Unlike the others where he looks at you to see or seeks your attention. The peeing behavior he does when I leave the room or I have my back turned doing dishes or he goes into the other room. I now have to lock all the bedroom doors so he doesn't go in and pee. Only door left unlocked is the bathroom door, which he does use often, but occasionally he just decides to whip it out wherever he is and just go. She says, I chalked it up to routine, people out of his life, new people in his life, but it has been over 6 weeks since his new therapist started with him. She's so vastly different than the previous one in so many amazing ways. So my question is, change in routine, because I know everyone is different, how often does it normally take for a little guy who's 5 and nonverbal to adjust? Could it still be that he's adjusting, or do you think that these behaviors are related to something else? More importantly, what do you suggest to eliminate these behaviors, especially the hitting and the peeing ones? Open to any suggestions. Last thing I need is a call from the principal that my son can't come back to school because he exposed himself. He's 5. He doesn't understand that part, but he does understand that he needs to pee in the toilet. Help!
Okay. So several different issues. I'm going to ask you to reread some parts of this because there was a lot of data in there and it's not in front of me. First of all, you shouldn't expect, this is not an adjustment. This is stuff that's going to happen. And this is what happens if you have a therapist who is placing a lot of demands, and usually our good therapists do place a lot of demands. We start to just get a bunch of challenging behavior, and this is just the child kind of acting out and saying, hey, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that, or whatever it is. Don't think that this is just going to go away on its own. In fact, for quite some time, you should expect some behaviors to crop up here and there. Just they'll come up, and as long as you know how to deal with them, they will go away. So, and especially don't forget the golden rule with nonverbal kids in particular. Until they have some form of communication, you will have challenging behaviors. Period. That's what it is. Because challenging behaviors are an expression of either need or frustration. That's what it is. So how else is he going to express himself other than these challenging behaviors? He's nonverbal. So we have to be working also at the same time on, I assume, a picture exchange communication system or an augmentative device of some type, or a reading program, or verbal. Something is in place, I'm sure, that is gradually building his communication ability, and that is the most important thing you could be doing, because as he learns to communicate in other more appropriate ways, these types of things will go down. Otherwise, they're not just expression of anger. They're just, they are an expression of, I don't want this, or I want this, or I want something else, or I don't want to be doing this, or hey, nobody understands me. That's what he would be saying. So if he could speak. So let's take a look at the 3 behaviors listed. The first one is pouring liquids out. That's actually really easy. Just make sure there are no cups around. Make sure that all the cups that you have are like sippy cups, or if there's an open cup, just put it out of reach. This is important to do for just a short period of time. It's a habit. As I said, what you're going to try to do is, until you have some better form of communication in place for him, just control the environment as much as possible, because there isn't much you can do. He's always going to come back with another type of behavior to try to communicate. And until you have a full communication system in place for him, these types of things are going to come up. They're just going to happen. So try to change the environment. Don't leave cups around him. And try to break that habit, and then you will gradually reintroduce the presence of cups. But when you have cups in his presence, you need to watch very carefully. See, this is one of the things that I often say, is that we think we can teach our kids as life goes on, and that's why we do 40, 45, 50 hours of intervention, because we're trying to do it in a lesson format. So the way that you teach that is, hey, first of all, there's no way you can do these things, because no matter what you do, this won't spill. Yeah. And secondly, then when you go to actually trying to teach him not to turn cups over or spill water out, you will start with a tiny amount of water in an open, semi-open cup maybe, and then you will try to block him from doing it, and then you will highly reinforce longer and longer segments of time where he can sit quietly with the cup there. So there's a bunch of shaping and fading things that your supervisor will put into place in order to make that successful, okay? So that's worked on. Now the second issue was the hitting, and can we read all the antecedents about the hitting again?
Okay, not angry hitting or even frustrated hitting, more like attention-seeking hitting. I will be talking to someone or on the computer and totally not paying attention to him, and then he will come over and just smack down both hands on my arm or lap. Okay. Once I look at him, he walks away. If I ignore this behavior, which I was instructed to do, he keeps doing it till I do look at him, and then he walks away.
Exactly. So we're pretty sure that he's doing it in order to get you to look at him. So we already know what the function is. The function is, if he had language, he would say, "Mom, look at me." Mm-hmm. Okay, and then he wouldn't hit you. Okay, so how do we give him the ability to do that without hitting you? I don't know what his level is right now. I don't know if he has an iconic system in place already. Perhaps
he does have an iPad. Okay. I know that he has an iPad with some sort of communication that he can punch something that says something. I do know that.
Great. So maybe we can put a symbol on his iPad which symbolizes, "Look at me." And we can teach him. Now again, this has to be an active teaching procedure. So it's not when you're talking to someone or when you're on the computer. In those circumstances, when you're talking to someone or when you're on the computer, my guidance is this: try to do that only when there's someone else there with him. So you're preventing the situation of him coming up to you and actually hitting you. Secondly, if you can't prevent it and there are situations where you're going to be on the phone or some other thing, then you will need to ignore him when he hits you. I don't care how, you will just need to not look at him. Now you could very easily disregard someone else's hand, like hold his hand or block it away, but don't look at him. Do not look at him. My preference would be that we prevent that situation happening altogether. In other words, someone else is there to keep him busy or give him attention and so on. But if it happens, then you have to do that. Now, the way to work on this is that if he already has an iPad, then you want to make sure that, and it's not always going to be possible for him to have his iPad with him, but you want to make sure that there's an icon on the iPad, and perhaps even a cutout icon stuck to the next side of where you sit. So let's say you're on the phone and there's a little icon symbolizing look at me. It could just say look at me, or it could be a picture of you looking at him or something like that. And it doesn't really matter what the visual is, by the way, because you will pair it enough times and you have that icon at your computer, at your phone, at wherever this thing happens. And the minute he comes up to you, before he gets a chance to hit you, you will take his hand and touch the icon and you will look at him. So what you're teaching him is, you touch the icon, I'm going to look at you. You hit me, I'm not going to look at you. Okay? It's really that simple. And so you reinforce the behavior that you want, and you don't reinforce the behavior that you don't want. And the behavior that you want has to be easier, which is touching the icon. Very, very simple. So that is something that you can practice continually, and the therapist can practice as well. Now let's move on to potty training. Can you read that section?
Okay, so lately, even though he's potty trained and has been for almost a year and a half, with the exception of wiping his own bum, which we are still working on, he has several times just dropped his drawers and peed on the floor in the living room, laundry room, backyard, and just yesterday the playground at school. Ironically, he does this when no one is around, unlike the others where he looks at you and seeks your attention. Peeing behavior he does when I leave the room or have my back turned doing dishes, or he goes into the other room. She's now locked all the bedroom doors so that he can't go in there and pee. The only door that's left unlocked is the bathroom door, which he does use often, but occasionally he just decides to whip it out wherever he is and just go.
This is very important, and you're right, it can cause some problems in school right away. I would speak with your supervisor currently and ask for them to do a full-on potty training intervention right now, which means they'll have to do some intensive work and reestablish the kind of the what's okay and what's not okay. But for now, I would suggest you go out right away and buy him a couple of overalls, so that he actually cannot take off his pants or drop his pants, because you want to be able to prevent the behavior as much as possible, just with environmental change. And I would also increase the number of times that you take him to the bathroom. So he's not in a diaper, right? Because he's going to the bathroom.
He's been potty trained.
So I would now go back to an increased schedule of taking him to the bathroom. So I don't know what his baseline is. See, these are the types of things I don't know. I don't know how often this behavior happens. That would be very important. That would help me establish a baseline of how frequently he's actually doing this. Assume it's happening once every, 3 hours or something. I would want to go back and make sure you take him to the bathroom every hour, and just check in and make sure. And then when you take him to the bathroom, or whoever takes him to the bathroom and prompts him to go, then highly reinforce the behavior of actually voiding in the toilet. And then the rest of the time you need to put overalls on so that he can't disrobe by himself right now. So you're breaking the habit that way. The second thing is that you do want to make sure that it's not happening at school. That's, of course, very important. I'm more concerned about the stigma of it and so on and so forth happening at school. And also what I also don't know is, what have you been doing when it occurs? Because sometimes when it occurs, we immediately run to the child and clean him up and so on and so forth. And this turns into kind of an attention-seeking or game type behavior. So I really don't know what the current consequence has been, and that's kind of an important factor. I could suggest different things based on what you've been doing, but we really don't know at this point what you've been doing. But let's fall back on the same principles as always, which is block the behavior as much as possible, so prevent it, and then reinforce the good behavior.
She did write in and say the peeing behaviors happen 3 to 4 times a week.
It's not that often then. So I really would suggest that you just put him back on a schedule. One of the phases of toilet training is a schedule. And I would probably do a 1-hour schedule, which is not a big deal, and then you can fade it out again.
Okay. And, because I was also thinking, my concern was what was the reaction at school, too, when he pulled it out.
So let me just say something. this is not most likely, and we often don't think in the way our kids do, but this is a child who likes to spill liquids. Okay, so peeing is going to give him a visual which is very similar to spilling liquids. Okay, so when he pees, he's also spilling a liquid, and that is kind of the visual that he's seeking out. So what I would do, stuff that you can do on top of this is actually teach him how to do appropriate water play. So take him to the sink at certain times, numerous times, because you're trying to shaping the behavior into something that's more appropriate. So take him to the sink and show him how he can take a cup and pour it into the sink, or make colored water, or whatever it is.
He could do dishes with you, but his own version of it.
Yes, absolutely. And he will enjoy that probably more because there's maybe bubbles and so on. You can do that if you have a swimming pool, if you could do that watering plants. That's a wonderful way to spill water.
Yeah.
Through a hose, just watering plants, and teach him how to make the water go further and so on. He'll love that. It'll totally be a preferred activity than just spilling or peeing. Yeah. So that's sort of one way to, even if you make it more fun than just spilling or peeing. But I can tell you, I know my kids. I have lots of kids, and it's fascinating to see that a change in potty training is actually seeking out visual stimulation, which is the visual of how water pours or goes at an angle when it spills. And it's funny that our kids find that interesting, but I have several kids where if they can't see it, they won't do it. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
That would never have occurred to me.
Yeah.
The one thing that I want to add on to is that what you said there about the hitting, and that he hits you, and if you were instructed not to notice it, but that eventually when you do, that then he gets what he wants. And Dr. Granpeesheh said, try to make it so that this can't happen. Just think about it in terms of, if you had a goal, something that you needed to do, and I know that you're one of those on-it moms, and you're driven to do something, and if it just took you a little bit longer to get what you wanted, you would double down on it, and you would work that much harder. So I always remember one of the first lessons when one of our first therapists came, and they were the voice in my ear and talked to me through, because I was about to give attention for something really bad, Jem hitting his head on the kitchen floor, and I wanted to give in. And they said, if you do now turn and give him the attention that he wants, all he'll have learned was that I have to try that much harder, and I will engage in this behavior that much longer. And do you really want to do that?
Yeah, because if you think about it from the child's perspective, this is how they're thinking. They're like, okay, wait, I used to tap her and she'd look at me. She's not looking at me. Let me hit her a little bit harder. Let me hit her a little bit harder. So they, escalate their behavior. This is called an extinction burst. So you're extinguishing the behavior, ignoring it, and they're wondering in their head, how come I'm not getting a response for the same thing I used to do? Let me do it more intensively or more frequently. And then you finally reinforce it. So what you've now taught the child is, it takes this level of hitting to get my attention. This level won't work. So the next time, the child will just go straight to that level. So you really need to be cautious about not reinforcing. And let me tell you, it is possible. I mean, I used to do this with my kids when I was little, and they do something inappropriate. I just avoid eye contact. It's quite possible. You can still grab someone's hand if you're not looking at them.
Absolutely. We have mom superpowers to do that.
And it will upset him.
Yep.
It will take him off, and he'll be pretty upset, but that's fine, totally fine. But that's what I'm saying. To begin with, it's better if you can kind of start with not even allowing him the situation to occur. But, life doesn't always turn out perfectly.
Right. But you do the best that you can. I'm so glad that you wrote in and that we had an opportunity
Hopefully
to talk
that
about
helped.
it. Yes. We were just talking about one 5-year-old who is not verbal. And now we're going to switch to another 5-year-old. And they said, hi, and thank you for your positive show. I'm struggling lately to stay hopeful and positive as things unravel, like my ABA program has come to a standstill for the last 2 months while we find behavior assistance to fill our 20 hours. My son is 5, and I see him regressing back to repetitive vocal and finger wrangling strangling behaviors. He isn't using his functional / pragmatic language as much either. I try to do what I can, but I have another child too. Is it typical for these types of behaviors to come and go with ASD kids, or should I be very concerned? I'm just feeling down because I expected him to respond better to treatment. I guess by 5, I expected him to be in a better place. It doesn't help that other kids by his age were recovered, but I know that there's a level of acceptance I need to come to terms with if he doesn't recover. There is a lot of progress I should be thankful for, like he is not injurious or eloping. He has lots of speech too, and thanks for the show. And, this really brings up all the emotion. And I was saying to Dr. Granpeesheh that, Nancy and I are really starting to see that there are different places along the way as autism moms where, we have expectations and then we have to adjust, and then we have expectations and we have to adjust. And it's different for all of us because we're dealing with different things, but it's all emotional.
Yes, it is.
So,
yes, it is. And, I just, as a non-autism mom, I want to tell you that I think the same holds true for other moms, too. We all adjust to different things, right? I mean, you have certain dreams and wishes and hopes for your kids, and things go a different way.
Yeah.
And sometimes with typically developing kids, they are more independent, so things can go a different way pretty fast. Right. So, there's other aspects to all of that. We do constantly have to adjust. That's just part of realizing that you've produced something who is not you.
Yeah.
But having said that, I want to assure this mom, first of all, that, this is, the whole up and down process does occur quite a bit. It isn't like, with some kids it is. With some kids who are very mildly affected, or if all the blocks are in the right place, let's put it that way, then things just go ridiculously smoothly. I remember I often would present this data where you look at kids where there's like up and down, or there's kind of a plateau and all this sort of stuff, and then you fix something, some aspects, which I'm going to talk about, and then all of a sudden acquisition just shoots up. So I've had that over and over and over throughout the years that I've worked with kids. So what I would recommend for you is, a few different things. One is have someone else assess your program. So I don't know who's doing your ABA program. Even if it's one organization, like let's say if you're at CARD, try to get to have another person, a senior person, evaluate your program. Like that's what I do. I often see kids and I will look at their program, whether it's CARD or non-CARD. I see a lot of non-CARD parents. And I'll just look at their program, and I can also do this online, or any of our senior staff can do this online as well. And what we do is we'll review the lessons and program, we'll view actual ongoing therapy. I mean, I oversee some of our kids in South Africa even, because I love the families and I want to see how the kids are progressing. So I just want to see them do their lessons. So it's very easy for us now, given technology, to actually see the interactions, spend some time looking at the child and their responses and going through every lesson and figuring out if we have the right stuff in place. Generally speaking, it sounds like you're not even hitting 20 hours. Do not forget that is a big factor. I mean, I've published twice now on the intensity of intervention. We just have another publication coming out on the intensity of supervision actually affecting outcome. So, from my perspective, I'm about to write a paper, which is a standards paper, which we're looking at, where I'm going to say so I'm very blessed in that I was in the original research, the 1987 study, and involved with Lovos when we were doing all of that. And the other day I was looking at some of our kids, and I was writing a standards paper, and I was looking at our standards and thinking, okay, an intensive behavioral intervention program, which your child is 5 and still qualifies for this, is 25 to 40 hours. 25 to 40 constitutes comprehensive and intensive. And when I look at that, I thought several things. One is I thought, how did we come up with that number? How did we come up with 25 to 40? And then I realized, okay, the 25 level marker came from from a study, I think that was done by Glenn Sallows and several other studies where they said at least 25. Right. So there are some kids who do very well with 25. That doesn't necessarily mean that 25 and 40 are the same. They're not, obviously. We've had numerous studies showing the more therapy you do, the more acquisition there is. It's a linear regression that it correlates all the way up. So you can increase how well your child does by increasing how many hours of therapy. And there is no maximum. I thought to myself, why did we say 40 hours? And of course, Professor Lovas is no longer with us. So I actually wrote to the only person who was my colleague at that time at UCLA when we were doing that study. And he said, and that's Tris Smith, Dr. Tristram Smith, and he wrote back and said, good question, I don't know. I think we just came up with it because it was what we considered to be intensive back then. You have to realize when we did that study and when Lovas suggested let's do 40 hours and see how these kids do, even 2 hours sounded ridiculous. The science had not developed. The field had not developed. The maximum these kids were getting was 2 hours of speech a week. So to go and it's ludicrous. And thank you, Ivar, for having had the courage to go ahead and say, hey, let's see how these kids do with full time. And that's how we define 40 hours. But from my perspective, and they, of course, did extremely well. Who would have thought? I mean, and that's his true genius. And I have to say, it's not about, I credit Lovas. Of course, Lovas was the one that brought the whole concept of ABA to the field of autism. It was his doing. But more than anything else he's ever done, I think it was just the genius of having the courage to say, let's give these kids 40 hours. Well, you know what? I'm going to be the one that writes a paper that says 40 hours shouldn't be the upper limit. Yeah. Because sometimes I see with our kids, they need more than 40 hours. They will do well if they have 50 hours, or why not? And I remember this very, very clearly when we did these studies at UCLA. Our goal was every waking hour. That was our goal, every waking hour. And the concept was if we do 40 hours of therapy, then the parents can cover the rest. Right. The idea was never, okay, let's do 20 hours of therapy, and part of that is the parents as well. I mean, that just isn't enough. So what I'm saying is with your child, it's possible that if you're not even doing 20 hours, let's say you're doing 15 and you're trying to fill in the rest of the hours, the most of his waking hours are non-therapeutic time. Most of his waking hours, he has the ability to develop these bad habits. So we're kind of going in reverse. And I hate to say that to a mom who's put a lot into it. And you're right, by the time they're 5, we do have certain expectations. But on the other hand, I've had kids who entered at 5 and recovered at 10. So don't give up. Keep pressing for more. There's, in addition to here's the key factors that you just want to step back for a minute and see if you're hitting the key factors. One is intensity of hours, okay? Make sure he is getting intensive services. 2 is quality of the hours he's receiving. Have someone else evaluate the quality of intervention. I've seen ABA that is golden and ABA that's horrible. You need to make sure they're doing the right things, the right treatments, functional ABA, everything is being done right. The content is right and the procedures are right and everybody on the team are doing it the right way. So that's the quality. 3 is, have you looked at your child's other issues? Does he have medical issues that are being dealt with? Are you sure he's not in pain or ill? Like sometimes I want to point out typically developing kids who have allergies. It's very interesting when you see a child who has or an adult who has an allergic reaction. You can barely teach them anything. They're puffy, they're sneezing, they're uncomfortable, and so on. Our kids have allergies, so please pay attention to those types of things. Is he sleeping? Like that is one of the key factors that I bring up all the time. Because sleep is such an influential factor in how we do in terms of learning. And most of our kids have interrupted sleep. Most of our children have interrupted sleep. And this is extremely important. So if he's not sleeping, please let's deal with that. Let's figure out what we need to do environmentally and in terms of things like melatonin or so on to help him sleep. So that's another factor. And finally, are his senses primed enough to receive the learning that you're giving him. And that's a very important factor. A lot of our kids have such significant sensory issues that they can't receive the information we're giving them. And that's just critical. Like, I've had children where, oh my gosh, we couldn't even get them to match two items on a table. And then the minute that we played around with it and realized, if you present something in a vertical process for him, he can see it, and now he's matching like this and has passed all of that. Or children where verbal instruction didn't work for them and we had to make everything visual augmentative device. So the sensory input, are you inputting things in a way that he can learn? That's something that an experienced behavior analyst would know how to determine. So these are all ideas to kind of bring life back to it. Sometimes as a mom and all of the weight of the world is on your shoulders, you just don't have the energy anymore to do this kind of thing. Kind of maybe the first thing you want to do is find some support for yourself. Get a friend, your parent, your friend, a teacher, the ABA supervisor. Is there someone that your husband, is there someone that who can be the captain for a short period of time, or at least be there to assist you and support you for a short period of time? Because sometimes we all just need a chance to take a break, and don't be disappointed. Don't be hopeless. You will make it through this one way or another. You will, and you just need a little bit more support right now.
Okay. We clearly touched on a nerve with a lot of parents, because we've had a lot of people writing in as you've been talking. Somebody who said, thank you for mentioning the kids entering at 5 and recovering at 10. Sometimes hearing so often about getting things at the right time and such really depressed me, as if insurance and money isn't there, it can't be done, and it's a source of guilt for me, feeling like we've somehow missed the boat because we aren't millionaires.
Can I just touch on that real quickly?
Yes.
And I want you to read more of those. That's important to me. But I do, more and more. If you remember, Shannon, a few years ago when insurance came into play, I saw the future and said, we're going to have issues with insurance in a year or two. And of course, we're there. Yeah. And the insurance companies took about a year or two to recognize the fact that this is expensive and it's ongoing. And of course, they're now alleging all sorts of stuff, and I want to be very public about this because this is not right. It's unbelievable. This is intensive therapy, and nobody wants responsibility for this. Funding source, at least. So, schools threw it at the Department of Developmental Disabilities, like regional centers, and then they threw it at the insurance companies, and now insurance companies are saying, hey, this portion of it is educational, I don't want to fund it, that portion of it isn't my problem, and this is all just, I'm only going to fund what's medical necessity, and nobody wants to really define what medical necessity is. So it's a game. But I want to tell parents who are listening out there, how many of you have actually taken this to an appeal level? Because let me tell you, we win every appeal. It is important, if your insurance company has denied coverage or decreased coverage, it is important for you to appeal. Most appeals at this time are actually being heard and are being responded to positively. It is very important for you to do that. Medical necessity basically means anything your child needs in order to function and survive. And from my perspective, that encompasses almost everything we teach our kids through ABA. So, don't think that an insurance company denying you is the last word.
Okay. And so I do want to remind the mom who wrote in about the 20 hours, really imperative that you take advantage of the 20 hours that you have, and really want to encourage you. I want to encourage all of us, myself included, that we don't give up, right? That we don't ever give up. There's always something more that we can do. There's something more progress-wise. And whether it's you that could actually do something, or going to your family or to a volunteer group it doesn't necessarily take money to build your program. It's certainly easier. Nobody is going to deny that. But we always refer to Maddie, that one of the first children who used the skills program, because there was no ABA program where her parents were, they went to the people at their church and said, we will train you in how to do this. Will you volunteer and come in and work with our child? And their child recovered isn't the term that their doctor used. Their doctor uses the term in remission.
That's wonderful. I don't care what you call it.
I don't care what you call it either. And that they did with volunteers using the skills program. There is a way. You just have to get on that backpack that says, I'm going to do whatever it takes until I can't anymore.
And I'm more concerned, as I always have been, for the moms and the parents than I am for anything else, because I'm a mom of 3 typically developing kids, and of course I have CARD, which is a big business and it's hard to manage and all these other things that I want to do, but I have to say 99.9% of the time I feel overwhelmed. I feel exhausted and overwhelmed. I cannot, with all the people in my life who help, all of my assistants here at CARD and my husband, of course, and so on, I always feel like there's not enough time to do the things I need to do for my kids, just for my kids, and they're typically developing, right? So what I want to say to every mom out there is, nothing will happen if you take 3 days off from life, 3 days off, to just plan things. And this goes to you as well, Shannon.
I know,
just take a couple of days off and just plan what you would like to do for your child differently. All the things you haven't had time to do. Whether it's, meeting with a doctor or with someone who's going to change things, or whether it's just taking the time to plan and say, I need to do this and I need to increase that. Just take that time and do it. Nothing else is going to happen. You would take that time if you had a cold. Which one's more important?
Absolutely. I am hearing that because there are things, just keeping it real, there are things that I'm not doing for my child either.
As well as for yourself.
As well as for myself. Absolutely. We're running out of time, and there are so many questions to choose from, but in this vein, I'm a parent from India, and I'm doing skills for the past 3 to 4 years. By now, my son is age 11 and a half, must have progressed so well if he was given a very intensive therapy. Unfortunately, though, I have his therapy as the number one priority. I was/am still not able to do 100% of what I would like to do. As I have been following all the ABA principles consistently, his behaviors are improving and his learning is improved and all that. However, I have a very strong feeling that if given intensively, my son still has a high chance of recovery or maximum potential or whatever it is. I just hope that age 11 doesn't automatically put him in the old kid category and denies him the chance. I really don't know what to do. I tried talking to other parents about ABA and they do not seem to be very interested or convinced. And again, this is in India. Perhaps because my son has not progressed so much, is there any way you could set up a center here in India or could provide a more intensive supervision? Please help and thanks so much.
Yes, I would love to help you. I love parents like this who are just amazing. It's funny because we have a few staff members who are connected to India, go back and forth to India and so on. So I really want to start a center in India. I'm assuming everything out there is private funding, so you'd have to be paying for all of this. We internationally, we don't set up centers anymore. I did a long time ago, and it was really very difficult to handle all the different employment laws. What we do internationally is we set up sort of similar to franchises, what we call affiliates. So, for instance, the affiliate we have in Thailand is a good example, or South Africa, or many others. What we do is we find a parent. Generally, it's been a parent. It doesn't have to be a parent, but I like working with parents. It's a parent or someone else who owns a school or wants to set up a business of doing a clinic for ABA. And we will then guide and assist and help run the whole thing. And we will train, we will train staff for you. We will send a lot of therapists and supervisors. Like right now, I think we have, I'm not sure, 2 or 3 therapists in Thailand, and I think 1 or 2 supervisors. And then supervisors who go there also fly there regularly to give oversight. I just met a gentleman, one of our male therapists in one of our Northern Cal offices, because I was there last week. And he said, I just came back from 2 years of Thailand, and it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And I just loved it. I love to hear stuff like that, because it's so fabulous for our therapists also to go to the other side of the world and do this work. So, you know, India is a place that a lot of Americans would love to spend some time, including myself. I would love to visit India one day. And I encourage you to reach out to John Galley, who is in charge of our remote services, who is a brilliant young man who is just a fantastic human being. His information is j.galley, Galle, at centerforautism.com. Please reach out to John Galley. If you didn't get that and you just want to go on our website and send in a comment, you need to request remote services. And then he will get on this. He will give you whatever resources we have out there. Try to find volunteers, people in your religious community who might be able to help increase the hours. 11 is not a end point by any means. I've had kids go until 14, 15 at an intensive level. So let me just tell you that it makes a difference. Our research publication that came out a couple of years ago showed that we're just replicating that right now, that the intensity of hours have an effect ongoing throughout life. There's no plateauing with this. It just is reality that once the child gets to a certain point, there's more and more and more to teach. So it becomes harder and harder. But nevertheless, I don't want you to give up hope just because your child's 11 by any means. He's already shown, just with a few hours that you've done, he's shown such progress.
If you haven't seen Recovered yet, it's a great video to watch. Yeah. And Nick, who's featured in it, went
till 14.
14.
Yeah.
And that's a huge inspiration. Nick, who is out there doing amazing things with his life right now.
Absolutely amazing.
Teaching and giving back. Okay, I want to squeeze this question in because it's about skills. It's in 2 parts. Hello, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. Wanted to let you know that we love you and admire you both. We have been using skills over a year now, and my son has made progress. I can't afford the card workshop model for remote services and hope one day I will. I have a question on a lesson we introduced last week about auditory memory. He has some language enough to express needs and ask questions, but missed to listen direction when done in natural environment. Although he had mastered 4-step directions with 2 distractors, because he likes working for a price, I guess. When we ask for clarification on what did she say, the teacher, for example, he said, I don't know. And even when we give him instructions such as therapist is coming this afternoon, and then we will do, I don't know what that phrase is, an activity, followed by what did I say, he goes, I don't know. The second part is the paraphrasing lesson is our goal. However, mandatory is to have auditory memory. That makes sense. We are having trouble when presenting 2 sounds, wait 30 seconds, and then ask what sounds were. But honest, it's so hard for me too. Any advice? Child age 8, high functioning, and thank you for your time.
Sure. Well, I'm glad that you're doing the executive functioning and cognition areas. That's very, very good. I'm not sure if your child... Okay, so auditory memory, yes, keep working on it. The fact that you just shorten what you're asking him to... if you say, what did I just say... just shorten it to 1 word and shape up from there. So say hello, what did I just say? And they'll say hello, and then make it 2 words and 3 words and so on, because you just shape that behavior. Okay, so that's a very quick thing there. I think you need to be working on the attention lesson, because it sounds like he is not clear on the saliency, so he doesn't know exactly. He doesn't pay attention when there's distractible things like environmental sounds, perhaps. So go to the attention lesson, which is in the EF curriculum, and take a look at those. That might help the whole auditory memory lesson as well. Going back to memorizing letters and numbers and so on, just you have to start with one and just shape up. So, I mean, memory is and you can pair with visual. Don't forget, you can use visual prompts. So let's say I say, you know, the girl went to the supermarket and that's way too long for him, or waiting 3 seconds is way too long for him. Give him some visual cues, because you like a picture of the girl going to the supermarket or written out or whatever it is, and then you will gradually fade those. So the visual cues initially might be completely visible, and then gradually you're just, you know, quick glance of it, and then you won't need it at all. So, you know, you will, and at the same time you can start with very short sentences, increase the duration, and at the same time you start with very short duration of time waiting, like 1 second, and increase that. So you're kind of shaping 3 different versions of factors involved in teaching.
Okay.
You're making the duration of time he waits longer, you're making the flash, you know, you're giving a visual stimulus, and you're making that less and less so that it becomes all auditory, and you're increasing gradually the length of what he has to remember. So in effect, you're slowly making it more difficult. Okay?
Love that.
And also with paraphrasing, don't go there yet. Yes, let him get very good at attention lessons and auditory memory lessons, and when you start paraphrasing, write it all out for him. Paraphrasing is sort of it's the lesson where you will say something and then want the child to say it to you in a different way, like what was I intending to say, or what did I mean? Okay. And don't go there yet, because it will completely confuse him. Make sure you get these other components done first.
Okay. I want to go to a sensory question now before we get to the end. Hello, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. I have a 5-year-old daughter with PDD-NOS. Her teacher told me she can hear noises in classrooms down the hall. She also talks about the road noise when they go outside. Sometimes when I am talking to her, she says I'm yelling, but I'm using a normal level of talking. She has a lot of sensory issues. Can she be oversensitive to noise? And thanks for your help.
Yeah, and if you look at the question right before it, they're both asking about oversensitivity. And yes, absolutely. I mean, I think this is one of the reasons that our kids have difficulty learning typically. They are highly oversensitive. Some kids are extremely oversensitive to sound, and I you know, my personal theory on this is that this is actually why they've learned to shut certain things out, because if the sound of things are so piercing, so disturbing, the sound of your voice perhaps and so on, you will learn over time to just block that out, because it's going to cause a lot of anxiety and just pain. So, and just think about certain sounds that, like, you know, here's a good example for moms. Sometimes I get to what I call my autism overload, when like I'm busy at work and the phone is ringing and my 3 kids are all talking to me at the same time, and the TV's on in the background, and someone just, you know, turns on a music or something on their iPhone. I'm like ready to shoot myself, because it's sensory overload, right? It's just way too much coming. And I think our kids actually experience sensory overload all the time with various things. Some of our kids do for sure. So, you know, try to think of ways to reduce that overload for them. For the child who's in the classroom and they're extremely sensitive, I'm not sure, maybe even try having little earplugs in there so that what they hear is less. I've done a lot of individual work with kids where we will speak into a microphone which is connected to Bose headphones, so all background noise is gone, and the child can now just control the volume of your speech and not hear background stuff, and then reintroduce background noise. We've done that so long. One of the things I do back in the 90s, I would record classroom sounds, and I would first work with the child on various lessons, extremely quiet environments in their bedroom, and then I would introduce in the background recordings of the school sounds so that they could acclimate to it and get used to it. help the child sleep by putting on white noise. White noise is extremely helpful to our kids. In fact, white noise in any environment might be helpful to your kids. I find it very difficult to hear the television when I have an air cleaner filter, and it produces white noise, which is just straight on noise. That detracts from the sound of the TV. And maybe our kids enjoy that. So play around with that sort of thing and make it so that it's not harsh for them to hear these noises.
Wonderful.